You are now listening to
Chakras and Shotguns. Welcome to Chakras and Shotguns, the podcast that guides you on a journey of spiritual development and personal preparedness. I'm Jen, a former lawyer, now yoga instructor, tarot card reader, and enthusiast of all things wellness.
And I'm Mick, a marketer, Reiki master, and prepper.
We're sure you've heard of emotional support animals, you've seen them on the plane, and maybe even animal therapy with dogs or horses. But what does animal healing mean on an energetic and spiritual level? Today, we talk with an animal communicator, Ellie Laks, about the power that animals have to help us heal.
Before we get into that, though, we want to remind you to sign up for our Patreon. We have exclusive content, discounts on show merchandise, and private sessions with either me or Jen. And speaking of, we want to shout out our latest patron, LP.
Hey, LP.
We appreciate your support. All right, let's begin the show as we always do with a little breathwork meditation to put us into a mindful place.
All right. Today, I'm going to give you guys a little peek into a practice that I have been incorporating each morning before I go out into the world. And it's really, the purpose of it is really to protect my energy as I move here and there. And I have found that it keeps some of the little annoying setbacks that may happen to you from time to time. I feel like they've gone way down. So let's get into it. Find a comfortable seat. You can always lie down. And place your hands somewhere on your body, face down. Grounding yourself, connecting with your body and your breath. Take a deep inhale in through your nose, filling your belly, your ribs, your chest. Hold that breath at the top. Taking one more sip of air. And exhale that breath out through your mouth. Emptying yourself completely. And hold there and allow yourself to experience what it feels like to be completely empty of air. Inhale in through your nose. Hold at the top. And exhale that breath out through your mouth. Let's do one more breath together. Inhale through your nose. And this time, seal your lips and exhale that breath back out through your nose. Allow yourself to breathe naturally. Try to match your inhales to your exhales. And further sink deeper into your body. I want you to, in your mind's eye, envision yourself sitting or lying down in this space. See yourself completely at peace. Notice how your shoulders are relaxed, how your jaw is unclenched. And then I want you to imagine a white or golden light, however it naturally appears to you, starting to float down and around your body. Imagine it covering your aura, your spiritual body, and then your physical body. Allow this golden light to completely cover you from the crown of your head all the way past your toes. Now, I want you to imagine on top of that golden shroud of light that there are mirrors facing outwards that are also attaching to that golden covering. That they are reflecting outward, and that their purpose is protective. To repel or reverse or bounce back any energy that doesn't serve you. Allow yourself to feel the emotion of gratitude for this protective covering over your body, over every aspect of your body. And slowly start to bring your awareness back to the present. Maybe wiggle your fingers and your toes. Take another deep inhale in and exhale out of your mouth. Start to bring your awareness back into the room. All right.
Thanks for that, Jen.
Yeah, I hope each of you enjoyed that, and maybe it's something you can incorporate before, you go out and about during the day.
All right, let's get into the main topic.
Mm-hmm.
So today we are welcoming Ellie Laks to the show. Ellie is an animal communicator and healing expert who consults with people, animal rescues, and sanctuaries all over the world on how to save, heal, and treat their own animals. Ellie is the founder of The Gentle Barn, which is a national nonprofit animal rescue and sanctuary with 3 locations across the U.S. The Gentle Barn houses and rehabilitates sick, abused, and traumatized cows, pigs, sheep, chickens, horses, and more. The Gentle Barn also welcomes the public to come and interact with the animals and discover their intelligence, empathy, and healing abilities.
Yeah, Ellie does amazing, amazing work, and she truly has a beautiful story that explores the dark and light of being an intuitive, because it isn't always fairies and unicorns. It may, however, include hugging a cow. So let's get into our conversation with Ellie. Ellie, thank you so much for being on our show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I can't wait to talk to you guys.
Awesome. For our listeners who may be unfamiliar, can you explain what is animal communication?
Absolutely. So animal communication is just basically intuition. So have you ever had that experience where the phone rings and without looking at it, you kind of know who it is? Or you're talking to someone and they're saying all the right things and smiling, but the hairs on the back of your neck are standing up because something just isn't right? Those are examples of intuition, and every living being on this planet operates with intuition. As a matter of fact, most animals' lives depend on it to know, oh, we better not go down to the river right now. That's not safe. Or, oh, it's totally safe to go and eat right now. We're safe, right? So animal communication is just simply intuition. And it's not that people have to learn how to do it, because I believe that we all know how to do it. Aboriginal and Native cultures practiced it on a regular, but we, in our religions, in our fast-paced societies, we've been removed from it. And so it's not that we have to learn how to do it. We have to remember that we can do it. When we sit in the stillness, which most people don't make time to do, but every other animal does, when we clear our minds and we wait for the answers to come, they come.
That makes sense. And how did you discover that you actually had this ability, or how did you find that you could do this so easily?
So animals have been speaking to me since I was a very, very small child. My earliest memories are of being 3 years old, toddling out of the house barefoot, kind of walking up the back hill of the woods behind my house, sitting down under a tree, and the wild bunnies were just hanging out with me. And then when I was 6, I have a very clear memory of being in my room playing with my dolls. And all of a sudden, it was like I got a phone call in my mind, like, oh, someone needs me. I put down my dolls. I walked out of the house, went down the street, took a left at the lake, a right by the shore. And there, underneath a very, very tall tree, there was a little baby bird that had fallen out of her nest. And I'm like, oh, thanks for calling. Here I am. And I picked her up and took her home. And I fed her until she was strong enough to fly away. And I thought that everybody did that. I thought the entire planet operated that way. We all helped each other. We all could hear each other. We operated by empathy and by intuition. When I hit elementary school, I started feeling a little bit lonely. When I hit high school, I really started getting bullied and teased for who I was and for my connection with animals. And wanting to be normal, I kind of shut the door to those gifts and tried to behave like everyone else was behaving. And that led down a very, very dark road of self-destruction. The minute you deny who you are, it's just a slow, painful death. And I was getting into drugs and alcohol and promiscuity, and I was just heading in a very dangerous path very quickly. And there was a point when I was in my early 20s and I was addicted to drugs, and just my life it wasn't a life. And I remember contemplating getting off this planet because I clearly wasn't happy being who I am, but I also wasn't happy not being who I am. And I didn't know how to figure it out. So I'm just like, well, I'll just leave. And much to my surprise, I realized I wanted to stay and I wanted to live and I wanted to do what I've come here to do. And so I kind of told myself, well, then get off the floor, eat a meal, take a shower, enroll in school, get away from these people you're hanging out with, and really make something of yourself. And so that started the very, very slow climb out of the hole I had dug for myself. And I knew that my life raft while I was drowning was owning who I was. So it's like, okay, now I have to own my gifts and I have to talk to animals and I have to listen when they're talking to me and I have to save animals because I've always done that since I was a kid. And I just have to be me. So the beginning was rough because I was so almost ashamed of my gifts because of the teasing and bullying that I just really had to work very, very hard to fully own who I was. And when I opened the Gentle Barn in 1999, I used animal communication to talk to my rescued animals and to ask them what they wanted, what they needed, what they were feeling, what they had been through, because a lot of the times, most of the times, we're rescuing animals and I don't know their backstory. So they could tell me what they'd been through. They could tell me how they were feeling, what they needed, what they wanted, and it really helped me help them. But it was something that I kept on the down low as far as other people. Like I did it privately, but I didn't broadcast that I was doing it. Every once in a blue moon, someone would find out about it and ask me for help. And when they did, I would help people. So I would do readings for other people. And in the pandemic, my friend Joan Rankwit, who has a school for animal communication and energy healing, she said, I know you struggle with confidence. Why don't you enroll in my school during the pandemic? You have time on your hands and you can gain your confidence. And I did. And it completely restored me to who I am and to who I've always meant to be. And my husband, who's always encouraged me to do animal communication professionally, built me a website and said, Ellie, you've got to help other people. And so now I do animal communication for people around the world. And I love it so much. I got to tell you, like drugs, alcohol, all the things, shopping, food, all the things that we get addicted over, it is nothing compared to the feeling of stepping into who you truly are. There's nothing better. And you two know that feeling because that's your journey too.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much for sharing, the duality of your story, right? The the darkness, but also coming back and finding the light. That was really, really beautiful. And yeah, it is really freeing to figure out who you are. I mean, like, this does not feel, it feels like something like doesn't quite fit. Like you have on pants that are too small, something I'm aware of. But you're just like, I'm doing the things, or I feel like I'm kind of doing what I should be doing, but I don't quite feel right. And then you get the permission, however that comes, to really be yourself. And it's very freeing. And you almost like want to weep, like, oh, I'm allowed to do this.
Yes.
It's really, really beautiful.
Yes. And it took me 2 years, 2.5 years, till I finally stopped fearing that people would laugh at me. For 2.5 years, I would go into every single reading and I would get all this information. I would write it down. And then when I went to call the person to relay the information, my biggest fear was, what if this is wrong? What if they laugh at me? And it's now 2.5 years later, and I finally shed that feeling. And I'm not scared anymore, because I made a commitment to write down everything that I got from the animal and say everything that I wrote down. And I just forced my way through it like stage fright. And now I don't have that feeling anymore. It's wonderful. It's so liberating.
For me, that's right on time to hear that story, because I do a lot of healing one-on-one sessions, and my clairvoyance will come through in these sessions, and I will see images and pictures and hear things related to the person that I'm working on. And a lot of times I'll only give like a small percentage of the information, because it feels like I don't want to be wrong, to your point. And also just feels still a little bit crazy to me that like this stuff is coming to me. So it's great to hear that experience of just like pushing through that doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because whether it's being bullied or teased, or whether it's religion, or whether it's just our school or just our society and our culture saying like, oh, that doesn't exist, you have that little voice going, guys, is this for real? Like, should I say that?
Yeah, I'll even notice you'll ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be like, where do you feel it? And then the person, or usually it's me, I'll say like, oh, I feel it in my neck. He's like, yeah, I knew that. And I was like, well, why didn't you just say that? Like, are you feeling it? I think you're feeling something in your neck. Are you feeling that? Like,
yeah. It's getting past the doubt, right? Like, I'd rather even ask the question and just have the confirmation, as opposed to just volunteering the information. So, I'm working my way through it.
Yeah, so we're all on a journey of self-discovery and owning who we are. Inch by inch, little by little, we step into our full purpose.
Ellie, were you supported by your parents? Were you talking to your parents when you discovered this about yourself as a child? I'm always interested in people who had gifts in childhood, and whether that was fostered at home.
So I don't know if as a child I was actually saying, no, I'm doing animal communication with that animal, and that animal said this and this and this. I wasn't spelling it out, but I was constantly in a place of knowing and trying to get my point across, and very rarely heard. I think one of the biggest traumas in my childhood was having 2 rabbits. And it was the transition between fall and winter. And my mom didn't want them in the house. She wanted to put them outside. And I knew that they were not going to do well outside. And I begged and begged and begged, please, please, please. Wasn't having it, put them outside. And in the morning they were dead. And just knowing things, being connected to animals, hearing their pleas for help, wanting to help them, and being stopped and blocked by whatever, other family members or financial resources, whatever it was not being able to help them the way they were asking for. And it feels wonderful to be an adult and not have to depend on anyone, and to be able to do what I know I want to do. And the ironic thing is, now in my adulthood, I talk to my mom all the time about animal communication and my sessions. And I remember the first time I did it, I was so fearing so much rejection, and she wants to hear all about it. So I've changed, and so have my parents. We all change and evolve.
That's beautiful.
So I just want to learn a little bit more about the gifts. Like, are there certain animals that you find are easier to communicate with? Is it kind of all creatures, or like more mammals and reptiles? Like, I just want to know a little bit more about the details.
Nerd.
So talking to animals is just like a phone call with a human. And some humans are more introverts and less talkative. So you have to ask a lot of questions and really pull the information out of them. Other phone calls with a human might be like they're so talkative you can't get a word in edgewise. And some people you meet and you just click with, and it's like an easy flow back and forth, and you could talk for hours, right? It's the same with animals. Sometimes I meet animals or I communicate with animals and I have to work a little harder, and other times they won't stop talking and I can't write fast enough. And other times it's just this easy back and forth, and my allotted 30 minutes to talk to them goes into an hour, and I have to call the people and apologize that I'm late because I just didn't want my time with their animal to end. And I also talk to animals that have transitioned, by the way.
Oh, got it.
Wow.
Okay. Can you speak to like even insects, like the smallest animals, or is it only like a certain size? I'm just nerding out over here a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, every life form has a voice.
Okay.
And you can tap into that energy with anyone. I can talk to flies and bumblebees and turtles and fish and tigers and bears and elephants and anybody.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I imagine that influences like your behavior when it comes to what we would consider like pests. Like I imagine you wouldn't want to just harm them because you're able to communicate, or like how does that work for you?
Yeah. No, I love every creature, no matter how tiny or seemingly insignificant they may seem to humanity. I love them and I work to protect them. And I work at the Gentle Barn to try to instill empathy and kindness and compassion in the hearts of children, that they can, how much more effort does it really take to take someone outside instead of harm them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You brought up elephants. We took a trip to Thailand years ago. This was before kids, 2016.
Yeah.
And we did, back then, everybody was going on these elephant rides and whatnot. And I remember, and I was a person that like went to zoos and, didn't consider myself like an animal activist by any means. But I just remember, and it was probably my intuition, something there. But I was like, this is not okay. Like they didn't outwardly really harm the animals, but I was like, I don't feel good. Like I felt sad. Like I felt like I was picking up on their sadness. And I feel that elephants are in particular, are very intelligent. Have you ever had the chance to communicate with one? And what was that like?
I have. Yeah. And at first I was like nerding out, to use your language, like, I'm talking to an elephant. Like I'm obsessed with elephants, just so you know. And I've collected elephant figurines my whole life, my whole childhood. So it was relatively early on in my, animal communication career. And I was freaking out. I couldn't believe I was talking to an elephant. And the truth is that once I connected with him and started the conversation, it felt the same as talking to you and me. And I kind of calmed down and got over it, because it was the same as talking to a dog or a cat or you. It was just a conversation. But in the beginning, it was really exciting. I was talking to an elephant that was in a sanctuary in Africa. And his mom had been poached. And then he was rescued as an orphan into the sanctuary. And he was having a tremendous amount of anxiety because the system in that sanctuary is they take the orphans in and they bottle feed them and they raise them and they, take walks out into the wilderness, and then they sleep indoors where they're nice and safe. But at some point, as they grow, it is upon them to kind of connect with other orphan teenagers. And then at some point to go back into the wild. And he was still young, but he was friends with some teenager elephants that would go out into the wild during the day and come back at night. And every time they left, he was like, I'm never going to see them again. They're going to be murdered. And so he was having tremendous anxiety over this trauma that he suffered out in the wild. And he didn't want them to go, and he wanted them to stay there. And he didn't want to grow up and have to go. And so I heard him, and I also shared his voice with his caregivers. But I also did EFT tapping on him. Do you guys know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I did tapping on him to release the trauma of his babyhood, and to release his mom being murdered, and to release that trauma of what the wild held, and to kind of get him to leave behind what he had been through and embrace the fact that he could be safe for the rest of his life. And it was wonderful. And he's doing much better.
I know. I'm like, next on my list, octopuses. No, I'm just
Did you guys see my octopus teacher?
I love it. And I've always had an aversion to calamari, like just in general. And I just had this innate feeling that octopus were just so intelligent, and seeing it just like kind of was a confirmation for me. I was like, this is why I've always had this thing about calamari. Like,
Yeah.
are you vegan, by the way, or how do you approach food when it comes to, your relationship with animals?
I am vegan for a few different reasons. I'm vegan because I absolutely love animals and would never, ever do anything to harm them. But, and you'll appreciate this, energetically, I don't want to consume violence and pain and suffering in my body and in my being. I want to be as intuitive as I possibly can be. I want to be as connected to all living beings as I possibly can be. I want to be as grounded to Mother Earth as I possibly can be. And I think putting the energy of suffering, violence, and pain in my body will disconnect that. And I find that, I mean, I've been vegan for a long time. I've been vegan for 24 years, but I feel like my intuition just keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger.
Let's talk a little bit about healing and how people can interact with animals and experience healing.
So I know firsthand what that's like from my own childhood, going through the challenges of growing up, the pain of feeling lonely and isolated, not really being seen for who I was. I always turned to animals, and they listened as I cried, and they looked back, mirroring that I was lovable and wanted, and they made me feel like the best version of myself. So when I founded the Gentle Barn in 1999, it wasn't just to save animals that had nowhere else to go, but to partner with them when they were ready to heal people with the same stories of trauma. And so I've seen miracles every day for the past 24 years. Incredible things like parents grieving over the loss of their children, children grieving over the loss of their parents, people with suicidal ideations, people with terminal illnesses, people with depression, anxiety, stress, everybody after the pandemic. And watching people being able to turn to our animals where there's no words, there's no left brain thinking, there's no trying to rationalize what we've been through and what we're feeling. It's just something that we feel in our soul. It's a connection without words or thought. It's a connection to another living being where you're feeling their energy. And it's incredible. It's so healing. It gives so much hope. It's really for everybody. And cows specifically have something very, very unique to offer. I think all animals do, don't get me wrong. I think every single animal on this planet has something to teach us, a way to heal us. I mean, I think they're so valuable. But I have found something slightly different in the cows, in that, first of all, I think cows are everything that we should be. They're matriarchal society led by a very strong and wise female that rules through intuition. They're vegan, so they harm no one. They meditate every single day, so they're always checking in with who they truly are, with their higher selves. They're always practicing self-care. They always face their challenges head on. Their feet and their teeth are designed so that they don't damage the pastures that they're walking through, so they're eco-environmentally friendly. Family is the most important thing to them. There is nothing in this world more important than family. They nurture each other. They groom each other. They're there to celebrate each other's births. They're there to mourn each other's deaths. They're extraordinary. So that in and of itself is very therapeutic to be with them, because they're so grounded and centered and wise and nurturing and amazing. But the other thing, the only reason why I think being with cows is so incredibly healing is because when we're infants and we're resting on our caregiver's chest, we can hear their heartbeat and we can rise and fall with their breathing, and we feel small, humble, and vulnerable on a giant protective frame. And then we grow up and there's nothing to replicate that. Sure, we could hug and hold our loved ones and our dogs and cats. It's not quite the same thing, except for cow hug therapy. When your face is against the shoulder of a cow, your eyes are closed, you can hear their heartbeat, you're rising and falling with their breathing, and you are tiny, small, humble, and vulnerable against a giant protective frame. That's where healing starts. That's where infinite possibilities live. And you can restart and reprogram your intentions, your manifestations, your trauma. You could just start anew like an infant would. And it's extraordinary.
It's so interesting that you bring up the cow. I've had an interesting journey with the cow in particular. I mentioned before that Jen and I are both from Texas, which, the stereotypical barbecue and
Hamburgers,
burgers.
steak.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I grew up in my diet having. And in 2021, I had this extremely vivid dream, probably one of the most vivid dreams I've ever had. And I was first person view living as a cow. And I was eating grass and I was walking around the pasture. And at one point, my child that I had, my calf, was taken away from me and slaughtered. And I woke up immediately and I was calling out basically for my daughter because I felt it so strongly that I actually thought it was my real human daughter who had been taken away from me. And I have not had beef, like one bite of beef, since then. So we're talking 2.5 years. I'm just like, I'm done with it. So it's very interesting that you brought that up.
Wow. And thank you for, there's so many people that could have had that dream and just gone on with their life. But thank you for your giant heart and your empathy and being able to connect with the message of that dream and make some changes. Thank you.
For sure.
Wow.
I always wondered why beef.
Yeah.
Why a cow?
Yeah.
And I have to say something else just to throw it out there, just a tiny little throw out. Every single animal experiences the same love of their family and their same wish to live a peaceful, happy life.
Mm. We wanted to ask if there's any other examples maybe that you can point to or stories that you have of someone who has come to the Gentle Barn and just had like a really, amazing healing experience.
I could tell you a million stories. And I'll tell you one of my favorites. And the reason why it's my favorite is not because it was like this big earth-shattering, crazy story. It's my favorite because it's so simple. So we partner with foster agencies, drug and alcohol rehab facilities, war veteran centers, domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters. We service individuals as well, but we also work with facilities that are helping people in need. And so we had this teenage boy come in with a probation camp. He was on probation. He was in this, kind of living facility, residential facility, trying to straighten out his life. And the first thing that we do when groups of people come to the Gentle Barn is we sit them down and we ask them what is the word that describes who they are and what is their dream. Because we want to always be cultivating that self-awareness and hope for the future. We can't design the life of our dreams if we don't know who we are, or at the very least who we want to be, right? And we can't move forward if we don't know where we're going. So he said, I'm cool. And so I said, well, can you expand on that? And he said, no, I'm cool. And I said, okay, so that's the word that describes you? He said, yeah. And I said, what's your dream? He said, I don't have one. I said, okay, I left it alone. He had some tattoos and stuff that suggested gang affiliation. So I never ask the story of the people that come to visit us because it doesn't matter. And I don't want to judge them with what they've been through. It really doesn't matter. But I mean, I could tell that he had a rough past. So after the discussion, we brought them all down to our horse barn. And I partnered each person with their own horse. And I told them the horse's story, and I taught them how to brush them and groom them and kind of connect with them. And when I set this one particular young man with our horse Caesar, he was still kind of trying to show off in front of all the other guys, right? He had this kind of like fake cool persona that he was really trying to hold on to. So he's kind of bouncing around and joking around and like kind of being really inauthentic with me and with the horse. And the horse was kind of like going like this, right? Because the horse is like, what is going on? So I took a risk, and this could have failed miserably, but I took a risk and I said to him, do you see your horse right now? And he looked, and he didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, your horse is sizing you up. Your horse has been through hell and back in his life. Our horse has had to develop a very tough exterior to try to protect himself from being vulnerable because he had been hurt so much. And he's sizing you up to try to figure out if he should trust you or not. And the way that you're kind of bouncing around and joking around is making him feel ill at ease. So would you be willing to kind of soften your voice and kind of still your body and so that Caesar knows that you're approachable. And like I said, I took a risk and I could have failed. And I was very lucky that day that he responded favorably to what I was asking. And he got very, very quiet and very, very still and kind of sobered up, you know? So I taught him how to really connect with the horse and brush the horse and scratch him in all his places. And I showed him how the horse is expressing pleasure or when he doesn't like something. And I really connected them. And then a hush fell on the barn where each boy was connected with their horse. The horse was really invested in their person and everything fell quiet. And I just kind of observed for about 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, I went back to him and I said, how are you doing? And in a very authentic, very calm, soft voice, he said, okay. And I said, what word would describe who you are now? And he looked up with tears in his eyes and he said, gentle. And I said, that's right. That's who you really are. And I extended my hand to shake his. And I said, it's really nice to meet you. And he burst into tears and we hugged. And he came to our program for the next 10 months. And he was never, ever, 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 ever again that cool, inauthentic, kind of fake, kind of jokey person. He hugged me hello. He hugged me goodbye. He was helpful. He was sweet. He was humble. He was vulnerable. He was open. And he graduated his program with honors. And like I said, it's not a crazy story. It's just a very simple example of how animals can help us find the best of ourselves.
Wow. I teared up. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Oh, how much the bravado and like the masks that we wear to tell the story that we want to tell is so inauthentic to who we really are.
Yeah.
Ooh. I'm gonna have to sit with that one.
All right. Well, before we go, we just want to have an opportunity for you to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, on social media. If they want to get an animal communication session with you, how can they book one?
So first of all, I'd like to invite everybody to check out the Gentle Barn. And we're a national organization located in California, Nashville, and Missouri. Come hug a cow, come hold a chicken, come look into these eyes of these amazing animals. You can go to the website, gentlebarn.org, and get a signed copy of my book, My Gentle Barn, Creating a Sanctuary Where Animals Heal and Children Learn to Hope. It's also available in all stores. My next book, Cow Hug Therapy, How the Animals at the Gentle Barn Help Us Be Human, is coming out in May. And that's going to be full of these incredible stories of these incredible animals and how they've healed people. And my website is ellielaks.com. And you can book an animal communication reading and just check out the work that I do.
All right. Thank you so much, Ellie. It was truly, truly a pleasure.
It was an absolute honor to talk to you all. Your journey of awakening is so inspiring. And the work that you're doing to heal people is remarkable. And I am going to sleep easier tonight knowing that you're on this planet with me.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks again to Ellie for coming on the show and sharing her gifts. Before we go, we want to remind you again to sign up for our Patreon. Remember, we have exclusive content and meditations and stories and readings and sessions with Mick and me. So definitely go and check that out.
And finally, guys, if you're loving the show, please subscribe and give us 5 stars wherever you listen.
Namaste.